All right, there's the appropriate song, Taking Care of Business. Let's talk about some of the business of Washington, D.C. with Congressman Ciscomani. Thanks for coming in. There it is.
There we go.
There you are.
I'm acting like if I'm new here. I didn't press the button.
Well,
but
yeah, we
happy
make
to
you
be
work
on.
here. We make you turn on your own microphone. Let's talk about, I want to jump into, first of all, I'm going to get to the border. It's a big, important topic and some veterans issues if we can. But we've got to talk about the timeline now, the budget, what's happening with this. And they're talking about a possible shutdown over the SAVE Act. Can you tell us what is going to happen in your opinion?
So you're absolutely right. Right now, the battle that we have on us, it's going to be around the budget. It's going to be around the spending side of it. We have a deadline of September 30th. As you know, I'm in the Appropriations Committee, and we did all the work in the summer, got all the bills out of that committee, and then off to the floor. Some passed the floor, some didn't. Some are sitting in the Senate. It's a mess over there right now. So when we go back in September, we have 3 weeks to figure this out before the deadline of September 30th. That's not a lot of time for the Senate to get on board and for the rest of the bills to come out of the House and then obviously pass a budget that we can all get behind. So the reality is that we're looking at a CR, a continual resolution, which means basically extending the current spending levels that we have, which again, going back to last year, we're spending less on this fiscal current year than the one we did before. So it's not a Pelosi budget anymore. This is the Republican passed budget that also passed with bipartisan support. Nevertheless, we need to pass a budget every single year. That's the responsibility of government. So when we look at that September 30th, the battle is going to be, what does this continual resolution look like? For how long does it go? What's the temporary status of it? And also what gets attached to it? You mentioned the SAVE Act. This is highly important. When we look at what the SAVE Act is going to do, and we passed that out of the House already with some even bipartisan support, is to make sure that in order to register to vote, specifically on federal election ballots only, you have to prove your citizenship. It's common sense. It's something that everybody should get behind. And like I said, it passed with bipartisan support. It's over in the Senate, doing nothing there, like a lot of the bills that have been passed out of the House. So it's going to be a long fight around the SAVE Act and the budget.
This is a little bit off topic, but it's about the budget. Karen Taylor Robeson here in the state of Arizona is an advocate for and fighting across the country for a balanced budget amendment. Mm-hmm. Are you in favor of that, enforcing your DC to work together and get a balanced budget?
If DC would, copy the state's actions on this, in the state of Arizona, I worked with Doug Ducey for 8 years. You have to pass a budget that works. It has to be balanced, and the states know that. And that's why when you get to Washington and they forget where where they come from, in the state of Arizona, you don't have the luxury of printing money like Washington does. That's a big problem. Being able to play accounting gimmicks with all this and pass budgets that are not balanced. We have to get back to a balanced budget, no question about it. The question is, how long would it take us to do that? If we look at the numbers now, what do we need to shave off? And that's something that we need to look at. I'm all for having something that forces the government to stay within its means, to spend only what we have. That's what households do. That's what even state governments do for the most part. Washington should be doing the same thing.
When you look at some of the specifics, we've had conversations about this before, Medicaid or Medicare and Social Security, less than 10 years, it's going to be insolvent. You have to address that, but nobody seems to want to touch it, and it becomes a political football in an election year. Is this something that needs to be and will be addressed?
This needs to be addressed. Like you said, when we're looking at those deadlines, that's scary for seniors. I represent a lot of seniors in my district, specifically around the Green Valley area. This is something that I hear about all the time, both Medicare and Social Security. We need to make sure they stay solvent. We also need to make sure we address the deficit in our own budget. And when you're looking at a debt of $35 trillion now, there are a lot of things we need to tackle on this. The priorities from here to as we finish this year is going to be, again, around the border, getting on the right track for fiscal responsibility. But these big fights are coming here in the next term.
I'm curious about your level of frustration because when you're working through the Appropriations Committee, you're getting things passed through the House that seem to be reasonable, and then they get over to the Senate and they just sit there, and you can't force that body to do anything.
Gosh.
How do you deal with it?
It's extremely frustrating. When I got there, I thought it was more of a joke and saying, the other side are what do they say, our adversaries or opponents, but really the Senate is the one that is stopping things really of happening. I thought it was an internal joke, but now I see exactly why. The Senate is slow in moving, and they have their own way of doing things there. And sometimes that way of doing things is to not do anything and really conform to just whatever it is, the status quo. The bills grow tremendously in spending when they come back from the Senate. So it is frustrating. One of the most frustrating things is sending border security bills over to the Senate, including one of mine with 56 Democrats voting for it in the House. You assume that it's got bipartisan support. It goes over to the Senate and again stalls and sits there with nothing happening. So it's extremely frustrating the way Washington works overall.
Congressman Juan Ciscomani is joining us in studio. So are you talking there about HR 2? Is that the
HR 2 was early in 23,
like 18 months ago?
That was almost 2 years ago. One of the first things that we did, and then my bill earlier this year on the Raul Gonzalez Safety Officer Act of tackling the high-speed chases. These are just two different examples, but we've seen many of them. HR 1 regarding energy, that all these have been going over to the Senate, and they just sit there.
I want to get to the border in the next segment, but I do want to ask you about the issues of the VA because speaking of that frustration, there are some things that seem to me to be absolutely nonpartisan. Forget bipartisan, nonpartisan. Veteran care would be one of them. And we've heard about the frustration from the VA secretary not really having much power to fire people and do things. There are a lot that needs to be done legislatively to fix what's happening at the VA. Is there any movement or possibility of getting something done in the House and the Senate actually taking it up?
Yes, there is. So we're working through a large piece of legislation that we're going to be considering probably towards the end of the year or early next year on this. It includes different aspects of this, but one of them is, again, the bureaucracy, the red tape, and how bloated the staff is on the VA is sucking up a lot of the resources that are supposed to go to veterans. So when you look at the funding that we go to the Veteran Affairs Department through the committee that I'm on, and it's not just about, you can't assume that it's all going to veterans. You have to see where the trickle effect is and who's getting paid and where the accountability is on that. So we had, as we talked last time, the Secretary of the VA visiting Southern Arizona and Tucson. We had this conversation. He saw the needs that were there, also what's being done well. But the ability to really just, crack down on the staffing on that is a big, big part.
Yeah, because there's such a big disparity. And I know you know this, but every veteran I've talked to raves about the care they get when they're in the system. Yeah. They love the healthcare providers in the system.
Yes.
It's getting in that they're understaffed at the care provision part of it. Yeah. And it seems like they're top heavy in management. Is that something that can be corrected legislatively?
Yes, it is. And you're absolutely right. When you look at the direction that we can give as appropriators to the department and working in conjunction with the secretary, that I have to tell you, I've had conversations with him. He's very willing for this, and he understands the need as well. Because as you mentioned, this is a nonpartisan issue. So we have a lot of the bills coming out of the VA committee that have that bipartisan support. The care that they receive once they're in the system is by far, from the majority of people that I talk to, is excellent.
Yeah.
Is sometimes not being able to get in, or the wait times being too long, or even when they don't have a specialist in that area and they have to go out and network off campus basically and go in community care, they're running into trouble of those doctors not being reimbursed properly by the VA, so they stop taking veterans. So the point is to get them the care they need, but also the access and the speed at which they need it as well.
And I think that's the most frustrating thing for people that watch it, is we think everything's running well until you hear of a complaint, and then people start digging, and the problem is much bigger than it seems. And there's not a one size fits all or a quick fix. But I'm glad to hear that you're part of the solution to this. What I want to do is in the next segment, because I know I got you for one more segment, I want to talk some more specifically about the border, and I want to catch up with you on the visit that you had from the speaker, because I think the powerful position he obviously has in the House of Representatives, I want to find out from you what he learned when he was here and what he's going to do with that knowledge coming up, because we got a lot of things happening before the end of the year, and what it might look like next year. That's going to be a big part of it. All right, so Congressman Ciscomani is here. He is going to be with us for one more segment after the news. So do me a favor, stick around, because it's very informative. A lot of things happening in D.C. All right, Congressman Juan Ciscomani in studio with us for one more segment. I want to talk about the border. I want to start with the NGO, non-governmental organizations, the people that are running the shelters. Can you give us an update on what's happening with them?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people know in Southern Arizona, at least, about Casa Alitas. That's one of the biggest shelters, and they've actually made national news for different incidents, members trying to visit and not being allowed to, or media not being allowed in there either. They've been national news for the wrong reasons. So I visited a couple times, and I got the briefings. I wasn't always satisfied leaving, but what came out, actually reported by news, is that they had been abused and nepotism and possible corruption on their expenditures, hiring a laundry company that they were overpaid by over $200,000. That laundry company was owned by one of the family members that worked at Casa Alitas, who now no longer works there. They were released from their duties, obviously. And actually, when the company was apparently hired for this, they weren't even registered with the state yet. So a lot of shady stuff that was happening there. Again, funneling money to these NGOs without the proper accountability. We've been saying that it was going to cause problems. Now, $200,000, the scope of the millions and millions that have been poured into this system may seem like a small feat, but I think there's probably more here that we have to be looking at, and we have to make sure that these dollars are spent properly. And they haven't, according to what we've seen so far. So much so that the county of Pima County has completely backed up what we're doing and agreed with us on this. So we sent a strong letter to do a full investigation by the Inspector General on this, and we're waiting for the response to make sure that we dig deep on this.
So the frustration from taxpayers about the deficit, in my opinion, is a lot of it has to do with redundancy and waste.
Yeah.
And if we could reduce that, we would not change one bit of the service that the federal government provides, and we can argue about if they're doing too much or not, but we wouldn't change anything. But you could reduce that deficit just by getting rid of a lot of this redundancy and waste.
The wasteful spending in Washington, and it goes on examples like the one we're giving here, on the redundancy of some positions or even some funding mechanisms, not having a sunset on a lot of what's approved out there. And then when things that do have a sunset, that they're up for review, all of a sudden, oh, you can cut that. Well, it was a temporary program.
Right.
And whatever is temporary, now the government falls in love with it, and they treat it as if it was always been there since
now
the founding of the Constitution.
Yeah.
We can't have those things. And that is what we have to look at and be strict. And is it fun to reel back spending? Of course it's not. And people are going to take it as cuts. But I got to tell you, we can't be heading in this direction any longer.
Congressman Juan Ciscomani joins us in studio. I know that you're an expert when it comes to the immigration process. You're someone that's been through it yourself, the naturalization process. The simplistic thing in my mind, and I oversimplify everything, but we deserve in America an immigration system we can be proud of.
Yeah.
And the immigration problem here is one that's a good one, that the world still wants to come here. We're still the shining city on the hill. People want secure borders. We want to be able to control who's coming and going. But we also, I think the vast majority of us, love the immigrant story, the American dream story, that we deserve an immigration system that is robust and fair. Is there any possible way in your mind that we can ever get to a secure border and an immigration system that is robust and fair?
I strongly believe so. If I didn't, I frankly wouldn't be good at my job. And if you don't believe that you can fix something, you should really get out of the way and let somebody else step in and do that. So I believe that we can and we should. We have that responsibility. And it starts with securing the border. Has the border been 100% secure throughout history? Of course not. We've seen different gaps here and there, but never like what we're seeing now. And when we have no control over who's coming in, that endangers the whole system, not just the national security aspect of what happens at the border, but it actually throws people to the very back of the line, and their wait time that they've been in the process already gets doubled. I've talked about this. It took my family 13 years to become U.S. citizens. This is back in the 90s. We became a citizen in 2006. Now, I've talked to people that have received letters from Homeland saying your application for a green card just got pushed back another 5 years. Now, these are people that are already working here, and they're waiting for that final permanent green card, and then after that, hopefully be able to become a U.S. citizen one day. These are the people that are being pushed to the back of the line when they've already been in the system due to the lack of control who's coming in and the overwhelming demand on the system, that we're not staffed properly, and at the border, it's a mess. So you have the humanitarian piece, you have the security piece, but also the sense of fairness to those people that have been in the system already. I feel for them, having gone through the system myself.
And it also then not excusing it, but these my words, not the congressman words. when people have been trying it the right way for so long, they have got to be immensely frustrated with the people that are walking to the front of the line and there's no repercussions, that they end up making the line longer for everyone instead of being expelled and told you can't do it this way.
It's frustrating. It's unfair. And then it makes you look at the system too. Now, back when I was going through the system in my family, the system maybe wasn't as overwhelmed as it is right now. And even then was 13 years. So there's definitely fixes that we need to make on the actual system. So when we promote that way of doing it, we have a way that we can meet work visa demands. We can meet student visa demands of people that, not everybody that wants to come here and stay. That's the other thing. But it seems like we've pushed everyone through one path, and then that path is just overcrowded.
But everyone I've talked to agrees with that principle and the idea that we do need a guest worker program, that it's beneficial to the U.S. economy to have a good guest worker program for people that are coming. It benefits the other countries because they're able to send money home and they're going back and forth. But we talk about it. But what is it that's stopping the Republicans and the Democrats from getting together and actually fixing it?
It's politics. It's politics. It's an unwillingness to actually tackle this issue. I'll say something that may be a bit controversial here, but when you've had an opportunity to tackle this immigration issue, Democrats have had a majority to do it, and they've failed at it. Republicans have also had a majority House, Senate, and White House to do something, and they haven't tackled the issue. So it's been a political football that neither side has had the will to actually do this. So this is one of my passion items, and I'm willing to work on this on bipartisan basis to get something done. Now, should we go for the big comprehensive immigration reform piece? That's going to be a lot more challenging. I'm always willing to pick a fight around this, but my point is that if we start tackling this one piece at a time, we're going to make progress. This whole notion of either we get a huge packet through or nothing at all has been the approach of Washington, and guess what? Nothing has happened. But if we start tackling at security pieces individually and also visa purposes individually as well for workers and in the ag community or in the service industry or whatever the demand is that we have as a nation, and we do this one bite at a time on this apple, I think we can get a lot more progress done and set up for a possible, larger package at some time. But right now, I can't stand by and say, if we can't get a big package, I'm not going to do anything. We have to keep moving one step at a time.
Well, you've got the power of the speaker because he was here. He was in Southern Arizona and saw a lot. Is he someone that is open to this plan of yours, an idea of yours, and implementing it? Because obviously he's the one that pulls the strings in the House. Getting the Senate's a different idea, but that can happen if they make some changes in the Senate. But can it happen? Is he going to make this a priority in the House?
He was asked that in one of the meetings that we had right before the white event that we were open to, and his answer was, I'm working with people like Juan that help advise on this. He looks at members like me that are on the border, especially with my background and my personal story on this, that he trusts on the issue. I was at the table on these conversations with Kevin McCarthy when he was Speaker. I've earned the position also at Mike Johnson's table regarding immigration and border security. So I'm very encouraged by the way that the Speaker is looking at this. He understands that we have to keep moving the ball forward, understands the priority on border security, but also knows that Mexico is our number one trading partner for Arizona and for the country, actually, for Arizona times 4. So we know the economic benefit of it and also the cultural benefit of it.
Absolutely.
If you hear the border communities, people have family on both sides. They travel back and forth to shop.
And have for generations.
For generations. This is the life that the people like me grew up with on this side, wherever, if I was on the Mexico side or now on the U.S. side, that's been the life. So it's not just the economic and the security piece, it's the cultural piece. We know how to do that. However, this administration has made it so difficult that when they don't secure the border, economically, we suffer. Security, we suffer. And also culturally, we suffer. So the open border policy of the Biden-Harris administration have gotten us in the position where it's been extremely tough and dangerous.
Congressman, I love the time. It always goes by so quickly, but I appreciate it. I know anytime you're in town, I would love to have you in studio to get the updates.
Count on it.
And I appreciate your hard work.
Thanks, sir. Talk to you soon.
All right, that's Congressman Ciscomani.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.